Everyone thought my husband was the calm, stable one. But calm men don't usually bring poster boards to your job, fake tears in a hotel lobby, or announce to their parents that you're opening the marriage without telling you first. So I walked out silently, and that's when he lost his mind. Before I get into what happened next, before I tell you how fast a man can unravel when the woman he underestimated finally goes quiet, let me just say this. If you've ever watched someone fall apart the second you stopped holding them together, you're going to understand this story a little too well. And if you want more stories like this, stories where the quiet ones finally snap the pattern, well, you know what to do. It helps more than you realize. My name is Casey Vaughn. I'm 33, and I didn't leave my marriage with a scream. No slammed doors, no broken dishes. I just vanished, quietly, cleanly. And that silence, it terrified him more than any fight ever could. Because while everyone thought Jared was a saint, soft-spoken, polite, predictable, I knew better. Calm doesn't always mean kind. Sometimes it means calculated. This is the story of how my boring, dependable marriage corroded underneath me like a rusted timing belt, and how my husband went from podcast philosopher to full public meltdown the moment I stopped playing along. What did he do when I left? He brought a poster board to my shop like it was Valentine's Day and staged a public meltdown. He tried to tell our friends I was unstable. He fake cried in my hotel lobby. And when none of that worked, he claimed I was pregnant. Spoiler alert, I'm not. I rebuild engines for a living. I know what a slow leak looks like. No flames, no smoke. Just pressure escaping one tick at a time until suddenly, boom, everything's gone. That was my marriage. No dramatic explosion, just years of quiet corrosion packed into 12 months. This is the story of how a boring, dependable marriage fell apart like a rusted timing belt, and how I took everything he feared most, my silence, my clarity, and my exit. On paper, my life looked like one of those budget-friendly Pinterest boards. Quiet, functional, moderately satisfying. I ran a mid-size auto shop just outside Knoxville. Good crew, steady clients, and enough grease under my nails to make half the HOA uncomfortable. My dad was a mechanic. My mom was a waitress who could out-tip the customers. I learned early on that peace doesn't come from silence. It comes from predictability, patterns, systems, bolts that don't shear under pressure. Men who show up on time and don't talk about emotional realignment at 11 p.m. after watching YouTube. Jared, my husband, or I guess my ex, worked in digital operations, email guy, workflow charts, the kind of man who thought eye contact was optional and meal prep was personality. My friends called him steady. My mom said he was respectable. I thought he was a soft place to land after a decade of loud, difficult men. We met at a friend's barbecue. He brought coleslaw. I brought a six-pack and a disassembled carburetor because I was on deadline. He said he liked that I wasn't like other women. I said thanks, but I'd rather be respected than branded unique. We dated for 2 years. He proposed on a hiking trail he didn't want to be on. I said yes, even though I could tell he'd rather be inside. And for a while, I thought that compromise was love. Looking back, I wasn't in love with him. I was in love with the idea that someone wouldn't break me. But still, when we said our vows, simple, private, surrounded by hydrangeas and 3 relatives who couldn't drive at night, I meant them. I just didn't know he meant his with a footnote. The first year of our marriage looked exactly how I thought marriage was supposed to look. calm, clean, repetitive in all the right ways. I woke up early, got to the shop by 7, spent my days wrangling invoices and torque specs. Jared worked from home. He had one of those jobs that involved a lot of tabs open and very little sunlight. We didn't fight, we didn't gush, we didn't explode with passion or collapse from resentment. Our routines became our intimacy. He made coffee, I folded laundry, we ordered cheap sushi, and fell asleep halfway through shows neither of us chose. Every now and then, he'd make a joke about how boring we were, and I'd smile and say, "Boring is good." Because boring meant no surprises. Boring meant no ex-girlfriends with late-night texts. No storming out, no smashed glass. Just this steady rhythm, predictable. We spent Sunday mornings doing grocery runs and Sunday afternoons avoiding yard work. On Wednesdays, he made tacos. On Fridays, we fell asleep on the couch, with a movie paused somewhere between the second act and our second glass of wine. If you'd asked me back then, I'd have said we were fine. Not curated, not enviable, just fine. I even liked it that way. I liked knowing where the keys were, how he took his eggs, what time the mail came. What I didn't realize was that while I was falling in love with reliability, he was growing allergic to it. And by the time I saw the signs, I was already knee-deep in a relationship that was quietly rerouting itself without me. The first crack didn't sound like a crack. It sounded like silence. One night, I was ranting about a customer who insisted his check engine light was just decorative. And I realized halfway through my story that Jared wasn't blinking. He was staring, not at me, but through me. Eyes fixed on the wall behind my head, like he'd walked out of his own body. "You okay?" I asked, nudging his foot under the table. He blinked hard, came back to himself, and gave me a lazy smile. "Yeah, sorry, just tired." Tired. That's what he always said. But tired people don't forget how to nod. They don't look like they're buffering while you're talking about your day. They don't zone out at dinner, during laundry, halfway through a sentence about whether or not the dog should be allowed on the couch. I logged it. That's how I handled things, mentally, methodically. I didn't make a scene. I didn't scroll through his phone. I just watched, and then I noticed the second crack. His phone. At first, I didn't think much of it. Everyone puts their phone face down now and then. But this was every time. Kitchen counter, coffee table, nightstand. Buzz, flip, face down. Like the screen had something to hide. I didn't accuse him. I'm not built for paranoia. I'm built for patterns. And that pattern was new. Then came the weird comments, random and out of place, like thought grenades tossed into everyday moments. We were folding towels, and out of nowhere he said, "You know, monogamy is kind of a modern invention." I looked up. "Okay, and?" "Just saying," he said, eyes fixed on the TV. "A lot of people are realizing jealousy is just insecurity. You don't really own anyone." I stared at him, holding a bath towel like a white flag I hadn't agreed to wave. "Cool," I said, "but I do own these towels. Let's start there." He laughed, kind of, but he never quite looked at me when he said these things. They weren't jokes, they were trial balloons, and I could feel them floating closer, like storm clouds pretending to be harmless. Jared didn't launch into betrayal with a grand speech. He tested the water with a toe, then a foot, then both legs while pretending he was just stretching. It started subtle. One night I was brushing my teeth, and he leaned against the doorway, holding his phone like it was some sacred scroll. "Did you know," he said casually, "that most successful open relationships are based on radical trust?" I spat out my toothpaste and looked at him. "Is that from Psychology Today? Or Instagram gurus with ring lights? He shrugged. It's a reel, but it's got good points. Later that week, he sent me an article titled, Jealousy is a Choice: How Evolved Couples Rewire Possession into Partnership. I read the title, then I closed the tab. That didn't stop him. Podcasts and blog posts filled with recycled language and couples preaching freedom from the same sofa. If I'd printed them all out, I could have wallpapered the shop bathroom. I'd be half asleep on the couch, and I'd get a DM from Jared from 3 feet away. Babe, check this one out. It's about breaking emotional chains. And still, I didn't snap. I nodded, I filed it. I logged the timestamps. I didn't scream. I didn't accuse. I observed. Because that's what mechanics do. We don't guess. We diagnose. We wait until the rattle becomes a knock. Until the gauge tips past red. Until you've got more than a hunch. But eventually, even patience has a limit. We were watching a rom-com, one of those movies where a couple fixes 5 years of emotional baggage with a rainstorm and a ukulele. And he turns to me, dead serious, and says, "Do you think humans are meant to be monogamous?" I laughed. He didn't. "Not really my thing," I said slowly. "Why?" He shrugged like it was nothing. "Just read a thing about it. Thought it was interesting." Except he wasn't reading. He was rehearsing. And every time he said the word freedom, it didn't sound like liberation. It sounded like permission. That's when I realized something. You don't try to change the rules of a game unless you're already thinking about a new player. He wasn't curious. He was laying track. It all came to a head on a Tuesday. Tuesdays are the most forgettable day of the week, which made it the perfect backdrop for something unforgettable. I came home after a 12-hour shift at the shop, face smudged with grease, hands raw from coaxing a stripped bolt back to life. I smelled like exhaust and victory. Jared was on the couch, half reclined, eyes glued to yet another podcast. Some guy with a man bun and a mic was mid-monologue. If you really love someone, you give them wings, not cages. Monogamy is fear wearing a tuxedo. I stood behind the couch, arms crossed. "You think this guy's single or just extremely divorced?" I asked. Jared flinched, then smiled too fast. "It's just something to think about." "Uh-huh." I grabbed the remote and hit pause. The guy on screen froze with his hands up, like he was being arrested for bad ideas. "You're being closed off again," Jared said. "No," I replied. "I'm being allergic to bad philosophy." He sat up straighter, defensiveness creeping into his posture. "You never want to talk about how things evolve." "That's because we don't evolve through YouTube," I said. "We evolve by showing up, being honest, not breadcrumbing our spouses with Instagram quotes while we draft exit plans in the group chat." He blinked, opened his mouth, closed it. "This isn't about growth," I added, voice calm. "This is about you looking for a way out that doesn't make you the bad guy." "That's not fair." "No," I said, "it's just accurate." He looked down at his hands, rubbed the ring he wasn't wearing last week. That's when I knew. This wasn't a conversation, this was a test flight. And I wasn't going to be the runway. The betrayal didn't come with a door slam or a text at midnight. It came with roast chicken and cloth napkins. We were at his parents' house, Carol and Bruce, nice people, the kind who call every candle seasonal and ask if you want decaf like it's a personality test. The table was set like a magazine spread, potatoes sculpted, napkins folded like swans. It was supposed to be dinner, not detonation. We made small talk. Carol talked about her book club. Bruce complained about traffic like he hadn't worked from home since 2020. I nodded, smiled, played the part. Then Carol, slicing the chicken, beamed at us and said, "1 year already. How are you two doing?" I smiled. "We're good. Busy, but good." And then Jared did the thing. He set down his fork, cleared his throat, and said, "Actually, we've been talking about opening our marriage." Silence. The room didn't just go quiet. It went vacuum sealed. Carol's hand froze midair with the serving spoon. Bruce blinked like someone had unplugged his brain. Even the candle flames flickered, like they were reconsidering their role in this scene. I looked at Jared. He didn't look back. He was looking at them. His parents, not me. That's what told me everything. He wasn't including me in the announcement. He was performing. I took a slow breath, dabbed my mouth with the napkin like I wasn't sitting in a marriage murder scene, and set it gently beside my plate. "Oh," I said, "I guess that was your announcement, not mine." Jared blinked. "Wait, what are you?" I stood up calmly. "Dinner was lovely, Carol. Bruce, always a pleasure." Then I walked out the front door without another word. I didn't run. I didn't cry. I didn't ask him to follow me. I just left. Because some betrayals don't need a debate. They announce themselves. I drove straight to a hotel that night, checked in under my maiden name, paid for the first week in cash. The clerk didn't ask questions, and I didn't offer any. Just handed over the ID, took the key card, and walked down a hallway that smelled like citrus cleaner and anonymity. The room was beige, the kind of beige that makes you feel like no one ever really lives there, which was exactly what I needed. Nothing permanent, nothing shared, nothing with his name on it. The next morning I called a lawyer, clean, fast, no-nonsense woman named Trina, who didn't blink when I said, "My husband publicly tried to soft launch cheating in front of his parents. I'd like that to be the end." She said, "Say no more. I've got time tomorrow." I texted Jared once, "I've left. I'm not coming back. We'll talk through the lawyers." That should have been the end, but instead it was the start of his descent. First came the texts. At first they were casual. "You're overreacting. Let's talk like adults. I was just exploring ideas." Then came the guilt grenades. "I miss you. You're the only person who understands me. You're turning this into a war." I didn't respond, so he escalated. I was eating takeout in my truck outside the shop when someone knocked on the window. I flinched until I saw who it was. Leo, Jared's best friend. The guy who'd stood beside him at our wedding. The guy who, up until recently, thought Jared walked on water. "You got a minute?" he asked. I rolled down the window. "What's up?" He looked serious, quiet, like he'd spent all day deciding if he should even be here. "I think you need to see something," he said. That's when I knew. Whatever came next wasn't a theory, it was proof. Leo didn't waste time. We sat in my truck, takeout still warm in my lap, the overhead light buzzing faintly. He pulled out his phone, opened a folder, and handed it to me. Messages, screenshots, photos. The first image was a selfie, Jared and a woman I'd never met. Side by side at some rooftop bar, faces close, his arm clearly not in a just friends zone. I zoomed in. Her name was Vanessa. The timestamp was 2 weeks before the "What do you think about monogamy" movie night. The second screenshot hit harder. Vanessa. "Did you tell her yet?" Jared. "Working on it. She's still closed off, trying to open her mind before I open the door." I handed the phone back and stared through the windshield. "You okay?" Leo asked. "Define okay," I muttered. He rubbed his jaw. I didn't want to get in the middle of this, but he started talking like a cult pamphlet. Leo shook his head slowly. You know what it is with Jared. He needs to be the guy who knows more than you. Always has. I frowned. Knows more. About everything. Relationships, work, philosophy. If he couldn't be right, he had to be enlightened. And if you didn't agree, you were asleep or unenlightened or too emotional. I let that settle. Because deep down, I'd felt that shift too, when the conversations stopped being mutual and started feeling like sermons. I figured something was up, then I saw the texts. I couldn't not show you. I nodded slowly. My chest wasn't burning, my hands weren't shaking. That's when I realized I wasn't shocked. I didn't cry when I saw the screenshots. I didn't scream, didn't throw Leo's phone, didn't ask why or how or when. But later, after Leo left, after the shop closed, after the last mechanic clocked out, I sat alone in my truck with the dome light buzzing overhead, and something in me finally twitched. Not a breakdown, not grief, just a pressure shift, the kind that happens right before a gasket fails. I rested my forehead against the steering wheel and let out a breath I'd been holding for a year without realizing it. It didn't shatter me. It didn't even sting the way I expected. It just settled, heavy, familiar. Because the truth wasn't what broke me. It was knowing that I had seen the signs and still kept giving him the benefit of the doubt. Still kept hoping the man I married was the man I had. And for about 30 seconds, just 30, I felt stupid, naive, human. Then the feeling passed. It burned off like morning fog, and beneath it was steel. Not anger, not revenge, just clarity. The kind you only get once the last illusion is gone. And in that still, quiet truck, I rebuilt myself. I'd been waiting for the proof. Now I had it. Cold, documented, and attached to a face I didn't recognize. He's been feeding me emotional TED Talks, I said, while spoon-feeding her lies. Leo didn't speak. He didn't need to, because in that moment, we both understood the same thing. Jared wasn't looking to explore, he was looking to excuse. And everything, every article, every reel, every sermon about freedom and fear, wasn't about philosophy, it was about preparation. I wasn't losing a marriage. I was dodging a bullet that showed up wearing cologne and a podcast subscription. Jared must have sensed the shift. Maybe it was my silence. Maybe Leo told him. Maybe Vanessa pulled away once she realized she was a subplot in someone else's life. Whatever it was, Jared lost whatever illusion of control he had left, and then he started performing like it was his last chance at an Oscar. Day 1, he showed up outside the shop with a poster board the size of a windshield. "Don't throw this away," it read in thick red marker that bled through the cardboard. It wasn't the words that got me. It was the fact that he was holding it like a promposal gone wrong. In full view of customers, employees, and a guy waiting for an oil change who literally whispered, "Damn, is that your husband?" I walked outside, wiped my hands on a rag and said, "Jared, that's a terrible font." He blinked. "I'm trying to fight for us." "You brought arts and crafts to an auto shop." Security escorted him off the lot. Day 2. He waited in the hotel lobby, eyes red, voice shaky. "Please just talk to me." I walked past him, tossed a blanket onto the couch from housekeeping, and said, "Crying doesn't match your choices." Day 3. The knock on my door came just after midnight. "I need to tell you something," he said, breathless. "I'm pregnant." I stared at him. "You're what?" "Well, you're pregnant." There was a long, awkward silence where I blinked like I was waiting for the punchline. "Oh," I said, "so your new move is to fake a miracle baby to save a broken marriage?" His face cracked. "Okay, maybe not pregnant," he said. "But I thought if you believed there was still something left to protect." I shut the door before he could finish. The moment the door clicked shut behind him, the whole hallway felt too quiet, too still. I leaned back against the wood and slid down until I was sitting on the carpet, knees up, hands idle in my lap. The kind of position you end up in when your body moves before your mind catches up. I don't know how long I sat there, 5 minutes, 10, long enough for the adrenaline to wear off and the echo of his desperation to fade from my ears. And in that hollow silence, a truth I'd been dodging finally caught me. He had never really seen me. Not the way I saw him. Not the way I watched him change, drift, unravel. I wasn't mourning the marriage. I was mourning the version of myself who kept trying to fix what someone else was determined to break. My throat tightened, not with tears, but with the weight of recognizing my own loyalty had been misplaced. Then, just as quickly, the feeling dissolved. I stood, brushed off my jeans, turned off the hallway light. There was no sobbing, no collapse, just a brief human crack. And then the metal set again, stronger, clean, untouched by his chaos. Because I don't negotiate with delusion. The next morning, I slid an envelope across the counter at the shop. "Can you do me a favor?" I asked Leo. He looked down at it. "What is it?" "Screenshots, printouts, timeline, all of it." "Is this for court?" I shook my head. "It's for Vanessa." His brows lifted. "She deserves to know," I said, "from someone who isn't using her as a spiritual side quest." He hesitated. "You sure?" "I don't need to scream," I said. "I just need the truth to land exactly where it's supposed to." He nodded and slipped it into his jacket. That was it. No signature, no return address, no confrontation. Just quiet, curated truth, gift-wrapped and hand-delivered. I didn't follow up, didn't ask how it went, didn't need to. Because revenge isn't always fire. Sometimes it's clarity, dropped like a wrench in someone else's gears, especially not after midnight. Day 4, I thought maybe we were done. Turns out, Jared was just saving his grand finale. Leo and I were at a little corner cafe, low-key, small tables, bad jazz overhead. It was the first time I'd laughed in weeks, some dumb story about a guy at the shop who tried to change a tire with a butter knife. Then the door slammed open. Jared, red-eyed, disheveled. That wild look people get when they think the world owes them a reset. "Oh," he said loudly, arms spread. "Didn't take long, huh?" Leo stood slowly. "Don't do this, man." "You don't get to speak," Jared barked. "You've been circling her since we got married." I put my coffee down. Calm, cold. "Jared," I said, "this is a cafe, not an audition." But he was spiraling. "You're both snakes, manipulating me, making me the bad guy." "You don't need help with that," I said. "You're doing great solo." He lunged, straight at Leo. Chairs scraped. Someone dropped a spoon. A barista yelled, "We're calling the police." Jared froze mid-reach, like his strings had been cut. Then the sirens arrived. 2 officers stepped in. One approached Jared. "Sir, we received a call about a disturbance." Jared pointed at me. "She provoked me." The officer turned to me. "Would you like to press charges?" I shook my head. "Just document it. I want distance, not a court date." They let him out, quiet, slumped, defeated. Leo sat down slowly. "You okay?" I sipped my coffee. Better than him. Outside, through the window, we watched the patrol car disappear down the block. And with it, whatever illusion Jared had left about being the hero in his own story. Chicken roast incident. Bruce, Jared's dad. I almost let it go to voicemail. but something told me to answer. "Hey, Casey," he said, voice tight, tired. "Just wanted to check in." "Everything okay?" I asked, already knowing the answer. "Well, Jared showed up here." "Of course he did." "Said you manipulated him, said he was pushed out, said we owed him support." "And?" I asked. Bruce sighed. "Carol told him to leave." I blinked. "She did?" "Yeah," he said. "Told him until he stops spinning stories and starts taking responsibility, he's not welcome here. She said he needed to grow up, that he weaponized the word freedom to excuse cowardice." I had to sit down. "She also said," he continued, "that you did the right thing. You stayed calm, you walked away. That takes strength." I didn't speak for a moment. Then I whispered, "Thank you." "We're not picking sides," Bruce said, "but we're not blind either." He hesitated before hanging up. "Can I tell you something?" he asked. "Sure." "When Jared was a kid," Bruce said, "he used to come home furious if someone called him predictable, hated it, even if it was meant as a compliment." I stayed quiet. He always thought if people could guess what he'd do next, they'd stop needing him. I swallowed that down like a bitter pill. "Thanks for telling me," I said. Because in one sentence, Bruce had answered the question Jared never would. He didn't cheat because he was curious. He cheated because he was afraid of being ordinary. I nodded even though he couldn't see me. And just like that, something inside me settled. Because when even his parents can see it, see him, it means you're not crazy. You're not overreacting. You're not dramatic. You're just done. The divorce was finalized that Friday. Trina slid the paperwork across the table, like she was dealing cards at a high-stakes game neither of us planned to lose. "Clean split," she said. "No spousal support, no contest, just signatures and silence." I signed without hesitation. It wasn't relief exactly. It was more like clearing the last warning light off a dashboard. A system reset. Nothing flashy, just done. 2 weeks later, I sold the house, packed my tools, left behind the memories. Didn't bother telling Jared. The last time I walked through that place, it felt smaller, dimmer. Every room held echoes of conversations that didn't age well. The couch we fought on. The kitchen counter where he sent me reels about freedom. The bed he stopped reaching for me in long before he admitted he wanted someone else. I dropped the keys on the counter, walked out, and didn't look back. Before I left, I took one last walk through the bedroom, not to mourn it, to leave something behind. On his nightstand was that book he loved, Radical Love and the Evolved Self, the one he quoted like scripture any time I pushed back. On his philosophies, I opened it, grabbed a pen from the drawer, and on 3 different pages I left notes in the margins. Manipulation dressed as enlightenment. Freedom without honesty isn't evolved, it's cowardly. If this is your Bible, maybe reread the commandments. I didn't rip the pages, didn't highlight in neon, didn't even dog-ear the corners. Just slipped it back exactly where he left it. Let him find it days or weeks later. Let the words sit with him, whisper back. That was the beauty of it. He'd think of me every time he reached for wisdom, and he'd hear mine instead. I moved into a 1-story place 5 minutes from the shop. No space for fantasy, just me, on my terms. I hung my jacket on the hook by the door, set my toolbox down on the counter, and exhaled. The silence didn't feel lonely. It felt earned. No more texts, no more signs, no more speeches in public parking lots, just rumors. Someone said he moved cities. Someone else said Vanessa dumped him. Leo heard he was in therapy, Good for him, but I didn't follow up, because that's not my job anymore. Last week, Leo texted me again. Just one word. Coffee, same cafe, same corner table, same bad jazz. But everything was different. I wasn't bracing for drama. I wasn't waiting for fallout. I was just breathing, peacefully. He looked at me, smiled, and said, "You look better?" I nodded. "That's because I am." He lifted his cup. To clean exits, I clinked mine back, and to never falling for a man with a podcast addiction again. We laughed. No tension, no subtext, just peace. I didn't burn it down. I just walked away, quietly, like pressure slipping from a sealed system. And in the silence that followed, all his control, all his spin, all his performative calm, it corroded, just like that timing belt I kept referencing, the one you never notice until it's too late. That was us. He ignored the wear. I watched the tension build, and when it snapped, I didn't scream. I just let go. And somehow that's what cracked him open most.